again, baseball fans, and welcome to another episode of MLB Draft Weekend Review. I am your host, Chris Dunn, and joined, as always, by my co-host, our Prospects Live Director of MLB Draft Scouting, Joe Doyle. Joe, what is going on?
It's good, man. Another Monday.
Just another Monday. We've got week 5 in the books. We've got a bit of a college basketball theme behind tonight's show. We're gonna do a little bit of our own March Madness, if you will. We've got a bracket that we're gonna unveil to you guys, give you an idea of what March Madness might look like in terms of the 2022 MLB draft. Give you guys something a little bit different, something fun and unique to look at, something to think about. So if you have any questions about any of those teams, if you want to have something to look forward to try to get some of those questions churned up in your head. Basically, we're going to be looking at 12 teams that are current schools being represented in the Sweet 16 of the March Madness NCAA men's basketball tournament. So there are 12 teams that we will have in this bracket, and we'll get to that in a little bit. So if you have any team that is currently in the Sweet 16 that you are a fan of their baseball program, be sure to get those questions ready. And Joe and I will address those a little bit later on in the show. But before we get into any of that, Joe, let's just look at some of the key performances from this past week, right? We're 5 weeks now into the college baseball season. We've got some pretty nice conference matchups that we've seen so far. And
first week of them.
Yeah. And so if there's one thing that's kind of stood out to me, let's remove conference play and let's just look at what has led up to conference play. There's one player in particular who I'm super excited to see how he does throughout the entirety of conference play, because I feel like he's probably been the most consistently dominant arm when I look at the college arms, and that's Hunter Barco. I feel like no matter what he does, no matter who he faces, he just goes out there, and it's almost like every week he's putting up a career high in something.
Sure,
right?
Seems that way.
When is it going to stop? What he was able to do this past weekend, what are your thoughts on Barco?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest development with Barco is just the sustained velo. It seems like every start out, he's going out and he's touching a 5. I believe he touched a 6 last weekend. The slider seems to be sharp every single week. He's turning over more changeups as is necessary against right-handed hitters. But 8 innings, that's a new career high. 10 strikeouts, 4 hits and an earned run. He's still not walking anybody, and that's a pretty good Alabama team with Zane Denton and some of the other talented bats. Jim Jarvis puts the ball in play better than just about anybody in the country. So I think you really laid it out perfectly. This is now the time. This is now the time when we're going to see SEC on SEC and Big Ten on Big Ten and Big 12 on Big 12. The ACC versus ACC. These guys are no longer, it's no longer, Hunter Barco went out and absolutely slayed against Florida Valley Southwest. Now you get the big dogs. And these next 8 weeks, these next 10 weeks are going to be critical in college baseball for guys as they try and establish their draft stock.
Yeah, I think we talked a lot of it about the ACC, several weeks back when we were talking about pitchers and we were talking about the arms over at Florida State and Bryce Hubbard and Parker Messick. And, it almost seems like we spent a lot of time talking about Florida State and how they might have the best rotation in the country and it could be the best pitching staff in all of college baseball. But then this weekend, we saw not just Hunter Barco go out there and dominate, like you said. We're now into conference play. So Hunter Barco goes out there against, like you said, a good Alabama team. And then not to be outdone, as if to say, wait a minute here, I'm also in the same conference. And I'm not just going to let you run away with SEC conference pitcher of the year. I've got something to say about this. Jonathan Cannon goes out there against a good Mississippi State team.
Yeah, very good. I mean, Mississippi State has not been the vaunted offense that I think we expected, but it's still got, Logan Tanner and Brad Cumbest and a lot of good players on that team. And to go 8 innings and give up 3 hits, 9 strikeouts against Mississippi State. I don't care if it's a down year for Mississippi State. They're dogs. And that's a big win for Georgia.
They're literally dogs.
They literally, I mean, yeah, they're Bulldogs. But here's the thing, like Jonathan Cannon is going to be a really interesting draft profile because it's not a sexy profile, right? The 9 strikeouts is not typical for Jonathan Cannon. He throws kind of a sinkerish 2-seamer, and he's got an above average slider. He's got a changeup, but he doesn't have the explosive fastball at the top of the zone. He's going to get his strikeouts on the breaking ball. So to see him racking up strikeouts in conference play is a sight for sore eyes, and I think he did himself a lot of good this weekend.
Well, we've actually got video from his start this weekend. Shout out to our own Will Hafer, who was up at that start this weekend. And so, we'll take a look. You mentioned the 9 strikeouts from Jonathan Cannon. Here they are right here.
I think that video does his stuff perfect justice. You see all the swings and misses on the slider. You see the darting 2-seamer that gets in under right-handed hitters' hands. And then while the changeup command was a pretty rough shot, it was kind of missing all over the plate, it still had enough action and separation off the fastball to get batters to swing over it, even if it was in the completely, wrong batter's box, for example. So he's got 3 good pitches. He's not going to be a strikeout guy per se at the next level. But I do think if you're looking for a safe college arm at the top of the second round with your second pick, Jonathan Cannon's going to have a lot of suitors.
All right, let's last one on the pitching side of things. And we're going to take it out west. I know this is sort of your bread and butter here.
Yeah.
But Cooper Jerpy had a pretty good showing for himself. I guess 0 earned, 1 hit, 12 Ks over 7 innings. Not a bad run there for the Oregon State Beaver.
Listen, this kid just needs all of the praise that is being sung his way. Oregon State is really good, and Cooper Jerpy is a big reason why. You're talking about a kid that's thrown 28 innings. He has 44 strikeouts in 28 innings. He's got a 1.88 ERA. He's only surrendered 18 hits in 28 innings. I mean, the stuff is just really dynamic, and for the people that were waiting to see whether or not it was going to translate over to Pac-12 ball, Arizona State's not a bad team. They got Nick McLean's little brother running out there. They've got Joe Lampe running out there. Those are 2 really good hitters. 12 strikeouts, 2 walks, just 1 hit. For me, Cooper Jerpy continues to be a first-round talent, and if I was running the show somewhere and I had a competitive balance A pick, that 31 to 36 range, Cooper Jerpy's my guy. I just think he has so much outlier to the way that he operates on the mound that he's going to find success in some role at the big league level. Love him.
All right, before we get into the hitting side of things for some of the guys that kind of stood out this past weekend, let's get to our first question in the chat, since we were talking about pitchers. And this one doesn't have anything to do with either of those SEC guys or the Pac-12 guy. But back to the ACC, like we talked about Florida State having a good rotation. But Gamers 2.0 here wants to know, did Carson Palmquist make his stock rise after his start and his performance against Clemson this past weekend?
Yeah, Palmquist looked great. Clemson has a loaded offense too. With Palmquist, though, it's not really about performance. Like, he's got the good changeup. He's got the good breaking ball. It's all about whether or not the fastball velocity is going to settle in at an appealing number. And I know that's not what, people want to hear. It's not something you can necessarily control, but there were parts of this year where he was 87 to 89. I think he touched 92 this past weekend. So that's obviously going to help his stock. But I'm just interested to see at the end of the year when we're tallying up the numbers, when we're writing the full scouting report, what was Carson Palmquist? Because if he's just a guy that's 88 to 89, touching 90, touching 91, but it's a really good changeup, you're probably looking like middle to the end of the second round, maybe third round. But if he starts settling in that 92 to 93 range, 91 to 93 range, Carson Palmquist could work his way up into that top 50 picks, no problem.
All right. So appreciate the question, Gamers 2.0 as always. And guys, don't forget later on in the show, we will give you our March Madness of the 2022 MLB draft prospects. So if you have a team that is currently represented in the college basketball tournament, we will talk a little bit about their school's baseball prospects heading into the 2022 draft. So get those questions ready. But Joe, let's move on over to the hitting side of things. And just a couple of guys here that kind of stood out to you. I know one of these guys we've talked about quite a bit, so I'll save him for last. But let's get into Andrew Jenkins here. I know he had a pretty good performance this past weekend. He's not the Georgia Tech guy that we normally talk about on this show, but Jenkins certainly had himself a good week.
Yeah, and I mean, if we include Wednesday on here, if we do Wednesday through Sunday, give him one more game,
Right.
he had 4 homers. You're talking about an 8 for 15 weekend with 4 homers. So Jenkins has a lot of fans in the MLB draft community. He can play first base, he can play a little bit of third base. He's mostly a DH type, but the kid can really hit, and the power that we've seen from him in the past is starting to come through a little bit more here, obviously, over the last week. So if there's a guy that I would say, watch out for in the ACC that hasn't really made his name abundantly clear early on this season, Andrew Jenkins would be a really, really popular pick. And if he heats up with Steven Reed and Kevin Parada and the speed that they have, Jake DeLeo and Chandler Simpson, if Georgia Tech's offense could be 6 or 7 deep, and especially if Andrew Jenkins starts turning in the numbers he turned in this week.
When you look at a guy like Jenkins, what's the ceiling for him come draft day? Are we talking about a guy that can work up into the 5th to 6th round range?
Yeah. I mean, it's tough. So college first basemen have to have that carrying tool, right? They've got to have the mammoth power. They've got to be able to hit. And Jenkins crosses off some of those boxes. I mean, he has a track record of being able to hit the ball. He does have some strikeout issues from 2021 that have not appeared as much in 2022. I tend to, I'll be totally honest. I don't even think I want to put a round grade or make any educated guesses on this, because for college first baseman, my experience is it's just what's your flavor. These guys can go in the 3rd round. These guys can go. I mean, Nico Cavadas went in the 11th round, right? So when you start talking about college first baseman, it's really it just takes one team to fall in love with them, and then we'll see how high he goes. But a lot of times there's no rhyme or reason for how high these guys go.
Right. All right. And then the other guy that stood out this past weekend is someone that we've talked about a little bit. I know that we talked about him at length last week when we broke down the top 400 prospects heading into the draft, and some of the guys that were climbing up the ranks a bit. And that is Dylan Beavers out at Berkeley. Talk about him this past week, and obviously a pretty good showing looking at the 4 games from Wednesday through the weekend.
Yeah, I mean, he's had a little hot streak here. Stanford and San Jose State and then USC, definitely turning things on a bit. He's hitting home runs. I mean, he's got 7 home runs on the year. He's stealing bases. He's playing a good defensive right field. Dylan Beaver's biggest question mark that has kind of crept up here in the last, I guess this season, is the strikeouts. He's been striking out this season a little bit more than most people were expecting, kind of floating around that 23-24% mark. So that has improved over the last week and a half. And if Dylan Beavers can continue to get that swing and miss to kind of, dissipate a little bit, I still think he's a really popular option in the 1st round. And, that home run, one of those home runs he hit against USC was a game winner. So he's just a ton of tools. I mean, you fall in love with the tools with Dylan Beavers when you watch him play.
Yeah, and I think one thing that is a pleasant surprise to see was the 3 stolen bases
Mhm.
right? I mean,
Kid can move. There's a lot of Christian Yelich in his game. I mean, you don't wanna really throw that comparison on a kid, but when you
right.
talk about the run tool, you talk about the defensive ability in the outfield, you talk about, the swing and the setup and the raw power to the pull side, there's a lot of Christian Yelich in him, and, um, really all he has to prove now is that the swing and miss isn't gonna hamper or handicap his ability to hit at the next level, and I think he's going to be able to do that. He's hit at every stage.
All right, and before we get into our next little segment here, when we will get into our little bracket here, one more question. This one from Giant Jules. This one has a lot to do with the volatility of the college arms, the injuries that we've seen. What are your thoughts here, Joe?
Yeah, so Conor Prielipp, first round stock. We currently don't think that he is a first round arm. We don't think he's far after that. I mean, we do think he's going to be fringe day one, early day two. And here's the reason why. Conor Prielipp really has like 4 or 5 games in his career, and it's not against advanced competition. The opposite side of that is he's a lefty with a good body that's been up to 97, right? So you kind of have to weigh. It's a lefty that has like 4 or 5 college starts. He blew out, and the competition wasn't that great. We'll see. I've heard he's at about 85% right now. He's throwing side bullpens. He's warming up. He's getting ready to showcase his stuff for scouts. I think he's going to be a full go by the time we get to June and being able to put on a show for scouts. So we'll see. I mean, it kind of depends on where the stuff is when that day comes. But in terms of bonus demands and pool implications and things like that, I think it's really too early to say. Conor Prielipp could go back to Alabama for his junior year, and if he's 97 to 98, he could once again be a top 5 pick. That's a good question. I mean, that is a bit of a wild card.
Have you changed your tune at all? And I guess change your tune is probably the bad way of phrasing it, but have your thoughts at all changed about the arms and the college ranks over the last 3 weeks?
Not at all.
Not in
No,
any
no,
way.
no. I mean, I think you're still going to see a few of them picked in the first round because there are too many teams that covet safety and college arms and the model. So, Adam Mazer and Cooper Jerpy and some of these guys, like they're going to go in the first round, but I still do think it is extraordinarily weak at the top.
All right, and then we'll do one more question before we get into our little March Madness bracket with you guys. This one comes from Sean Murphy. It has to do with the SEC and our top 400. And guys, if you haven't had a chance, if you are still going off of the top 300 from several weeks back, go and check out the top 400 list. It dropped about a week and a half ago now. The top 400 prospects heading into the draft. And so this question has a lot to do with that list and one player in particular from the SEC. So, Joe, do you think that Owen Diodati from Bama can get into that 250 to 275 range? It's awfully specific there in that range.
Yeah.
But
So a couple things. I like Diodati a lot. He's a very physical outfielder. He's got a ton of power. He's a corner profile. I want to see him hit more, and I want to see a better approach at the plate. Diodati is an aggressive hitter. He takes a lot of hacks. There is a little bit of a strikeout concern there. And, whenever you're talking about what it looks like at the next level, you kind of want to see a guy that makes consistent contact. So right now, I think he's kind of an end of the second day type of a pick, maybe early day 3. But Diodati showed out really well, especially towards the end of 2021. And it would not surprise me to see him tear up the SEC here at the end of the season again.
All right. So we're going to go into this. This is a bit of a fun, different approach for us. Obviously, for those of you loyal listeners, this is something different. In the spirit of March Madness and in the spirit of college basketball, I thought, why not incorporate a little bit of basketball? Why not incorporate a little bit of, flair, I guess, into the show? So we went ahead and we put together a March Madness bracket for you guys. And again, it's basically a look at all of the schools that are currently represented in the Sweet 16 of the March Madness tournament that have a presence in the college baseball landscape, or more importantly, have some sort of presence on our top 400 or top 600 prospects heading into the draft. So keeping all that in mind, let's just get right into it, Joe. Really excited about this one and kind of
It's pretty cool.
Hear your thoughts on some of these guys. And guys, Joe didn't know any of what I was doing here until late last night. So give him all the credit here for being able to, on such short notice, put all this together and kind of break down his thoughts on this. But here we go, Joe. Here is our bracket for the draft prospects March Madness. You look here, if you look at the rankings and how this was seeded out, and I'll give you an idea, and I'll just tell you flat out how I ranked these schools. So these schools are seeded by the total number of prospects that they had on our draft board. Now, this is not just the top 400, but this is taking into account the top over 600, or I forget exactly what the total number was, right around 600 total
630
prospects.
or something like that.
Yeah, so these seeds take into consideration our entire draft board of over 600 prospects. So Arizona had the most number of players on that draft board, so they got the number 1 seed. And then it goes down the line. Arkansas had the second most number of players, so they got the number 2 seed. And then anywhere that there was a tie for teams that had the same number of prospects on the draft board, we went with the school that had the player that was highest on the list. So there's a lot of tiebreakers. I believe Gonzaga and Miami both had 4 players on the list, but Gonzaga won the 8 seed versus Miami getting the 9 seed because Gonzaga had the higher overall player on the top 400 list. So now that we've gotten all that out of the way, and now that everyone kind of understands how this bracket was made up, let's just get right into it, Joe. Arizona's going to get the automatic bye into the second round. So Gonzaga and Miami right there, that number 8 versus number 9 seed. Give me your breakdown on that Gonzaga Miami matchup right there.
Yeah, I mean, if we're just talking about the best prospects in general, I'll treat this like a matchup, right? And I am a stickler for pitching. I think pitching is how you win a lot of games. Gonzaga has 4 pitchers right now that are currently in our top 400 in Gabriel Hughes, William Kempner, Tristan Vreeling, and Brody Jesse. I think that gives that team a really good shot at competing against any team like a Miami team. Miami is no slouch either. Carson Palmquist and Alex McFarland are great arms. JP Gates is a great arm. And they've got Max Romero behind the plate, who's another good player. But at the end of the day, I think Gonzaga would probably be my choice to take down Miami in that game.
All right, so Gonzaga takes out Miami. Let's drop down to UCLA and Houston. This one, I think I can just kind of speak for you a little bit on this one. Houston, not much of a presence, but they do have a presence. They have a presence on our draft board in terms of, like I mentioned, that top 600 prospects. So I guess talk a little bit about the chance of Houston and why Houston is even represented in this tournament here.
Yeah, listen, Houston's got some good arms, right? And they're arms that we are certainly tracking. I mean, last year they had Robert Gasser, and they've got some good arms that are coming up behind him. But this year, the only guy that we currently have on our top, 620, and I will add Houston prospects to this as we go, but Anthony Tulamero is one of their catchers. And Tulamero spent 2 years at Kansas before transferring to Houston this year. He's got great bat-to-ball skills, and he does a good job of putting the ball in play. There's some raw strength. He's shown exit velocities that can catch scouts' opinion, but he's going to have to find more consistency with the barrel to become an impact hitter for that lineup, and that's not something that he has shown yet this year. So, yeah, Houston a bit overmatched here by UCLA, but I will say it is a bit of a down year for UCLA just in terms of their draft prospects and their health. Max Rychik is our highest ranked UCLA pitcher at 111. And, he's been good, not great. Michael Curioli, their shortstop, has been good, not great. And then guys like Jared Karros and some of their other pitchers have been hurt. So UCLA hasn't really been able to flex the muscles that they've generally been accustomed to flexing. There's just so many freshmen that are playing this year for UCLA that it wouldn't surprise me to see them drop a game to Houston. I mean, they barely took the series against Harvard this weekend, and I'm not taking anything against Harvard. Harvard's got a really good arm, but if you're UCLA, you should probably, based on history, be taking care of Harvard at a much more comfortable level, I guess.
Yeah, I think for UCLA, it'll be more interesting to see them the next couple of years.
Yeah, they'll be very good.
Class.
They'll be loaded in 2024.
Right. That class, that recruiting class from this year, really stellar out there in Westwood. So UCLA is going to advance there. Texas Tech is also going to advance as the 4 seed. They're going to get that automatic bye. Moving on over to the other side of the bracket, Arkansas is going to receive that automatic bye into the second round. And then that takes us to the number 7 Michigan Wolverines and the number 10 Purdue Boilermakers. What are your thoughts on this one here?
I really like Michigan a lot. They've got 4 prospects that are kind of spread out. Clark Elliott is our highest ranked prospect in the top 50. Jimmy Obertop is a good catcher that I think you could go see go on day 2. Teddy Burton is an extremely underrated bat in the country. He's their second baseman, first baseman type. A little bit of Luke Gold in his profile. And then they've got a horse at the top in Cam Weston. So they've got a little bit of everything. And I think that kind of helps you beat up on teams if one side of your game is struggling more than the other. But Purdue's good too. I mean, Wyatt Wendell has been really nasty this year. Curtis Washington out in their outfield has been very good. And Paul Totes is certainly no pushover himself. So I like Purdue. At the end of the day, I would probably say this is Michigan's game to win.
Yeah, many of you guys might not be too familiar with the Purdue guys that are on this list. They were all outside of the top 400, each of them falling in that 400 to 500 range. Wendell was at 434, Washington at 449, and Totes came in at 467. So you guys wouldn't have seen them on the top 400 prospects list. But again, guys that are there and certainly could move up a little bit. But Michigan here takes it. Moving on to UNC and Kansas.
Yeah. So this is a game where I think, especially with the underclassmen, I would expect North Carolina to take this game pretty handedly. Brandon Schaefer has been really good. He's a lefty for North Carolina. And then they've just got so many guys that have contributed. I mean, their entire infield, Mac Horvath and Danny Soretti and Alberto Osuna and Tomas Frick. These are not guys that you necessarily are going to see on a top 400, but they're not far off, and they're all very, very accomplished college players that will be in professional baseball. So you add in that they got Vance Honeycutt, who's like maybe one of the best freshmen in the entire country this year, and suddenly North Carolina just looks pretty stacked.
All right, so we've got through the first round. Duke's going to get that fourth and final automatic as the 2 seed. They're going to automatically move into the second round. So let's go ahead and take a look at what the Elite 8, right? The Elite 8 would look like for the 2022 MLB draft prospect teams.
Yep.
And so now we have Arizona squaring off against Gonzaga. Mm-hmm. Nice little West Coast matchup there. That's a great baseball and basketball matchup there. UCLA and Texas Tech. And then on the other side, we've got Arkansas now getting a chance to battle up against Michigan. And then look at what we have down at the bottom right-hand corner. UNC versus Duke. Couldn't have drawn it up any better. But let's start up with Arizona and Gonzaga. Joe, what are your thoughts on this West Coast battle here?
I will always give Gonzaga a shot with the arms that they've got. And that's not a bias. I didn't go to Gonzaga. I know they're in my neck of the woods, but they can beat anyone with their pitching. They don't have a very explosive offense, and I think that's going to hold them back in this matchup. Listen, Arizona's just got too much ammo. Daniel Susac is a top 10 prospect for us. We love Tony Bullard. He's finally starting to come back and produce. And then they've just had so many guys that have kind of come out of not nowhere, but Tanner Otremba has been incredible this year. And Dawson Netz, their right-handed pitcher, has turned into a legitimate top-of-the-rotation type guy that follows up maybe a first-round pick in 2023 and TJ Nichols. And then, all of their role players, and Nick McClaughley and Jacob Blass and Mac Bingham and the list, Travis or Chris Barraza, that can go on Sundays, or he can pitch out of the bullpen. Arizona right now has like 9 or 10 guys that we think could get drafted this year, and it just seems like too much firepower in a 3-game series.
Yeah, if you look at the top 400 list, Arizona's got 4 guys on that list, just like Gonzaga. But
they've got 4 guys in the top 500 too.
Right.
You know what I mean? So
yeah,
7 total.
Yeah, there's 4. I think there's actually, and then there's, even if you take it a step further, I think there was 9 guys total from Arizona.
I mean, you're talking about 9 guys, maybe 10. There's another guy that I don't have listed here in their bullpen. That could be 10 Arizona Wildcats that get drafted this year. It's absurd.
So Arizona's going to move on in that matchup against Gonzaga. And then at the bottom, we've got the 5th seed UCLA Bruins and the 4th seed Texas Tech Red Raiders. What do you got there?
Let's talk about Texas Tech, right? So Jace Young is the story here, and he hasn't been as explosive and dynamic as a lot of people thought he would be early on, but he's been very good. Behind that, they have a loaded pitching staff with arms galore in the bullpen. Brandon Birdsell has looked every bit that of an ace, at least at the college level. Andrew Morris has been very, very good. And then Chase Hampton and Austin Becker in that bullpen really make it pretty dynamic. So I would say that Texas Tech probably wins this game, and most of that just is due in large part that UCLA is so young.
Yeah, again, you mentioned it. UCLA is a team that we're going to want to watch, and you're going to want to follow for the next 3 years.
They finally got guys to actually end up on campus. They always get their guys poached in the draft. And Malachi Knight and Cody Schreier and Luke Jewett and Gage Jump and Thatcher Hurd. I mean, they might have. There's a chance that UCLA could have 5 or 6 first-round picks in the next 3 years.
All right, so to the other side of the bracket, we've got Arkansas after receiving that first-round bye as the number 2 seed. They will take on Michigan. What are your thoughts here? Now, Arkansas, just before you get into this, Michigan on this list, we talked about their guys in the first round. Michigan has 4 guys that were listed on this draft board for us. 3 guys in the top 400, but a 4th guy that was just outside the top 400. And then looking at Arkansas, we're talking about they've got, 7 guys in the top 600?
Yeah, and they've got a lot of top 100 presence too. I mean, Robert Moore and Caden Wallace, and unfortunately Peyton Pallette is hurt, but this is an offense that can score some runs with Moore and Wallace and Brady Slavens, and Jalen Battles is no pushover either. My question with Arkansas is going to be their pitching, and I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. Hagen Smith and Jackson Wiggins look very, very good, but I might surprise you on this one, and I think Michigan would have a pretty good shot here in a 3-game series. Yeah, I mean, listen, you got Cam Weston, you got some good young pitchers at Michigan, and then you've got a whole bunch of guys that can contribute in a dynamic way with Teddy Burton, Clark Elliott, and Jimmy Obertop. This would not be any fun if I just said the team with the most prospects would win every series. So give me Michigan in 3. I think they could take down Arkansas that has an extremely young pitching staff.
Look at this. We have our first. Is this our first? Yeah, this is the first upset of the tournament. We have a 7 seed knocking off a 2 seed and going to the Final Four. You heard it here, guys. Joe Doyle takes Michigan over Arkansas in terms of the school that has the best draft prospects heading into this year's draft. So Michigan knocks off Arkansas despite being outnumbered in terms of total number of prospects. Just quality does it there for Michigan and gets them by the Razorbacks. So down at the bottom, we've got the big time rivalry between North Carolina and Duke. Number 6 seed Tar Heels and the number 3 Blue Devils.
Yep.
What do you got?
So this one's close. The famous rivalry. I think people need to give Duke a lot more respect because they have got a serious arsenal of arms. Marcus Johnson has been very good. Billy Seidel is a right-handed pitcher that is 6 foot, 220 pounds, that is not getting nearly enough love. He punched out the first 6 batters he faced this week. I think Cooper Stinson is the perfect senior college pitcher to anchor a staff. And then they've got some ammo in the lineup with RJ Schreck, and they've got Alex Mooney, and they've got some younger kids that are performing as well. Chad Knight has been catching some good ball games for them. So I will go Duke here, but I will say North Carolina. I was close. I love Brandon Schaefer in North Carolina. It was close.
All right, so we're going Duke over North Carolina. So that's going to get us to the Final Four. We've now gone from the top 12 into the Elite Eight, and now we're going to go to the Final Four. So the Final Four schools that are represented here are going to be the Arizona Wildcats, the Texas Tech Red Raiders, the Michigan Wolverines, and the Duke Blue Devils. So here's that matchup here, Arizona versus Texas Tech. But before we get into that matchup and who you've got winning, Joe, let's go out to the chat. I've got a question here from Kevin Gallo in the chat. Is there any concern over Chase Young's power that could cause him to drop out of the top 10? I think there's obviously a little concern of dropping out of the top 10 regardless, but what are your thoughts there?
I mean, I don't think so. Jace Young, he just hasn't been pulling the ball with authority. I think every single one of his home runs this season has been a missile to the opposite field. Nobody's questioning the raw power per se. He's got 4 home runs. I think the bigger question is going to be, I wouldn't even call it a question right now. The guy's got 21 walks. I mean, nobody's pitching to him. He's played in 21 games. He's got 21 walks. He's got 13 strikeouts. He's hitting .377. I think the only thing that could ultimately push Jace Young out of the top 10 is if he stops hitting, and or there are scouts that are just too worried about his ability to play second base or third base at the pro level. But I wouldn't be worried whatsoever about the power.
Yeah, throw me a pitch to hit and then tell me that you've got concerns over my power.
Right. Can you imagine? Can you blame him for going to the opposite field? I mean, all he's getting is changeups.
Right. Outside part of the plate. Look, all right. Yep. So here we go. All right. I'm going to just put this kid on blast here. Casual MLB fan. You're on the wrong show. Can the Cubs sneak a wild card? Maybe. This is not the show, man. Read the room.
It's a good question though. It's a good question. And the answer is no.
Well, there you go. I was going to say, we'll get to that one later, but no.
I'd be stunned, man. I would be stunned. Here's a better thing. What are the higher odds? Marcus Stroman is traded in July, or the Cubs have a wild card berth? I would go Stroman getting traded. I know he's got a full no trade, but something to consider.
Yeah, I mean, he'll find a team that he'd love to latch onto that's, going to make the playoffs and love to go there. All right, so we got to your question anyway, casual MLB fan dropping in on the MLB draft weekend review, March Madness prospects bracket. We got you anyway. All right, so Arizona, Texas Tech here, Joe. Who you got winning?
I got to go Arizona. I just think Arizona is too loaded, and I really think Arizona is a team that probably needs to be getting a lot more love for Omaha. Like I said, that lineup is 6 or 7 deep, and Dawson Nets has been really, really good, and TJ Nichols has been really, really good, and they've got a bullpen, and they've got starter depth. Arizona can withstand a lot right now, and they've got the top of the draft firepower in Daniel Susac. They've got the leaders up the middle with Susac. I just have a hard time seeing Arizona losing this game unless Texas Tech takes an early lead and shuts it out with the bullpen. But give me Arizona. All
right, so the Wildcats are going to the championship game. Who will they be facing? Will it be Michigan? Will it be Duke? Michigan, the surprise team here, the 7 seed knocking off the 2 seed Arkansas Razorbacks, getting a chance to play the Blue Devils with the right to go to the championship. Who you got, Joe?
Maybe it's just me playing to our good buddy Brian Zakowski, but
what?
Give me Michigan, man. I don't know what it is. There's something about Michigan, and there's something about Jimmy Obertop and Clark Elliott and Cam Weston and some of those really just interesting bullpen pieces and role players in that lineup that I think Michigan could win this game. Again, it's another upset, and I would not be stunned at all if Duke swept them in 3, but give me Michigan.
So we've got Michigan knocking off the number 2 seed in the top half of the bracket in Arkansas.
Maybe I'm just pandering to our viewers.
I know we're gonna have to. We might have to get. I mean, with this, you might have to reach out to Brian, get him on the show, and be like, "Well, hey."
Brian would probably say, "Joe, you're crazy. Stop."
But isn't everyone like that? Like, no one wants to believe when your team is the lower seed. No one really thinks that they're going to make a run like that. I think that's kind of what everyone. You hope that they do, but you never, speak it on the open market like that because you don't want to sound so ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, look at last year. Like, how many people were saying East Carolina is a threat to win it all?
Right.
Gavin Williams is really good, and they had a lot of good role players. And I think sometimes just older players and experience goes a long way. So maybe I'm shooting my shot here. Give me Big Blue.
All right, so we've got the Wolverines going to the national championship game here against the Arizona Wildcats. So there it is, Arizona Wildcats, Michigan Wolverines.
Stops here.
What happened?
The buck stops here.
Are you telling me that the Wolverines are not going to win at all?
No. Arizona would. I think Arizona throttles this matchup. Listen, at the end of the day, Arizona. If you're just going off these 12 teams, Arizona might have the best team in this bracket, and it wouldn't surprise me to see Arizona in Omaha this year playing for a national championship. They're an extremely talented team, no matter the context.
Well, Arizona wins it all. I mean, let's just, for argument's sake, lay out the scenario where Michigan has a chance in this one and Michigan wins.
Yeah, I mean, Clark Elliott and Jimmy Obertop and Teddy Burton just mashed the ball. TJ Nichols shows his age, and he's just not the starter that they need as a true sophomore. Dawson Nets gets beat up after a really impressive showing at the beginning of the year, and the Arizona Bats go quiet. But I just don't see that happening. They've got too many guys. And another guy that I haven't even brought up, right? I've talked about like 6 or 7 hitters on that Arizona team. Chase Davis might be a first-round pick in 2023. He's got massive power. He was almost a first-round pick in 2020. So Arizona's loaded, and they might have 2 or 3 first-round picks in 2023 as well. This is not a team to be taken lightly.
All right, so there you have it, guys. The Arizona Wildcats are the winner of our very first March Madness of MLB Draft Prospects bracket. 12 teams representative of their schools that are currently playing in the Sweet 16 in the men's basketball tournament. Put those teams together, rank them by the prospects that they have that are going into the 2022 MLB draft. And here you have it. This is what you have if you take all of that information, you jumble it up into a bunch of spreadsheets, throw a bunch of guys in front of a microphone and let them talk about it. And here's what you have. You have Arizona over Michigan in that championship game, and the Arizona Wildcats are the winner of the 2022 March Madness of MLB Draft Prospects list. Joe, this was super fun. Maybe we can come up with other things like this throughout the year, and certainly bring something like this back next year. So appreciate all your help with this. This was a fun activity for us to get through this show tonight.
Yeah, I had a blast with it, man. It was a really cool idea. You put me on the spot, and I'm glad Arizona was in it because they're easily the best team on that list, in my opinion.
Yeah, so I was hoping, of all of those teams, the team that was decided last was Arizona. All the other teams had been decided. That Arizona game last night versus TCU went after midnight East Coast time for me. So I'm lying in bed, and that game's in overtime, and I'm literally putting this bracket together with Arizona as the number 1 seed and ranking everyone and seeding everyone, but also putting together a second one where Arizona loses, and now Duke is the number 1 seed and TCU falls somewhere in the middle, and putting together a whole different bracket. I kind of wish that TCU had won for our argument's sake here on this, because to your point, Arizona with 9 players represented on our draft board of the top 600 seemed like a bit of a runaway here.
I do think the top 2 teams, if you want to put Arkansas into that bucket. I do think Arizona and Arkansas are decidedly the best teams on that bracket. And I
Yeah.
apologize to my Razorback listeners that saw, the team go down to Michigan. But yeah, I mean, those two teams are they're stacked. And they're stacked in the top 100. They're stacked in the top 400. They're stacked outside of the top 400. Yeah.
All right, so we're going to get right into some Q&A. I know you guys have been holding off some questions and had some questions throughout us going through the bracket. A lot of them didn't really have much to do with players or teams that were represented in that little tournament bracket there. So now we're going to give you guys a chance to kind of free form any questions that you have on any players out there. We'll get to those now. I see one that just actually popped up a little while ago. So appreciate you bearing with us on being patient here. Josh Pimentel in the chat. There are several college outfielders, Joe, vying for a first round selection. We've talked quite a bit about 4 or 5 of them over the last month. How would you personally line them up after DeLauder? And I guess I'll even take this question a step further. Is it guaranteed to be lined up after DeLauder?
I mean, for us, DeLauder is still the top college outfielder, and there's a pretty decent gap between him and Gavin Cross. Gavin Cross also has tons of runway to be able to separate that gap. Listen, I mean, Chase DeLauder outside of the first series has like multiple hits in every single game. I mean, if you get rid of the Florida State series, Chase DeLauder has been, unhuman, with the exception of the concussion that he suffered. He came back. I think he went 0 for 2 in that game. And then he went like 6 for 10 in the series. So Chase DeLauder just looks like the full package. And I know it's unconventional, but he's too good for me. For the third college outfielder would probably be Jordan Beck. And I think Jordan Beck has a good chance to work his way up into that top 12, top 15. The only downfall on Beck is he's a right-handed hitter, and right-handed hitters generally have a little bit of a mark against them. And then you're looking at kind of the Dylan Beavers and some of the other guys, let's see, Judd Fabians, the Brock Jones. But Brock Jones is a guy that's certainly fallen.
And how close to those guys, because we've talked about him quite a bit in his performance early on this year, how close to those guys is someone like Jacob Melton?
So here's the thing about Melton. Love everything about Melton. Center fielder, probably going to shift over to left field. But the problem is he's 22. He's going to be 23 years old. He has almost no leverage. It's kind of not a strange body, but it's a running back body. So I tend to think Jacob Melton is going to be someone that gets picked in like the 6th or 7th round just because he doesn't have a lot of leverage. But if I was a team that ended up with Melton, I'd be pretty stoked because I think there's a lot of there's some Michael Conforto in everything that he does. It's just, I guess he just caught on a little bit too late.
And where will Michael Conforto be playing his baseball this season?
It's a good
Joe?
question. It's a good question.
Rub the lamp. Let's just do it. I mean, why not? We went off the rails and we talked about the Cubs. Where will Michael Conforto be playing this season?
That's such a tough question because it seems like the reluctance to spend money is the big thing that's holding him still on the market. I will say, I think the White Sox make a ton of sense. I could see him going to the White Sox, but also, I could see the Yankees too. I'd watch out for the Yankees on that one, I think.
All right. So appreciate the question, Josh Pimentel. What do we got here? Sean Murphy has one for us. Is there a team in the last part of the top 25 or just outside of the top 25 that could get on a bit of a Cinderella run and get to Omaha? So when we look at those teams, Joe, I mean, looking at the top 25, we're talking about teams like Gonzaga, Maryland,
Clemson
certainly up there now, Louisville, maybe Georgia Tech, some of those type schools. Do you see anyone in that area that could make a run at Omaha?
I like Clemson. They've got some good pieces. I think Mac Anglin is a great number one. I think he can win you that first ball game against just about anyone. And then Caden Grice and Max Wagner and some of the players that they've got in that lineup can move the ball. I do have TCU circled. I think TCU's got a lot of good arms. They've got a lot of good arms that can keep you in games, into the 6th or 7th inning, and they've got some bats. So TCU would be another team that I have circled. As much as I want to say Gonzaga, and I do really think Gonzaga can pitch against anyone in the country, ultimately, I don't think they have the bats.
Well, TCU certainly winners in 6 of their last 7, and took 2 out of 3 from Baylor this past weekend. So
Yeah,
certainly capable. And who knows, now that we're into conference play, they get a couple more big conference wins against teams that, are viewed as being superior to them.
yeah.
And TCU could climb this list a little bit more.
And TCU also has I want to say he's a corner outfielder, but he could be a third baseman by the name. I think it's Braden Taylor. He's on our 2023 board, and I just can't remember his name. But talk about a guy that could be a top 15 pick. He looks like a monster. He looks like a monster. So they've got some thump too.
Braden Taylor, 353 with a 511 on base percentage.
How's that?
So far this season.
Does that work? That seems like
I don't.
It's, as a true sophomore.
I mean, he's no Chase Young. He doesn't have 21 walks. He only has. Hold on. Correction. He has exactly 21 walks.
He's gonna have more. He's gonna have more than that next year when people decide to stop throwing to him.
3 homers, 19 RBIs so far in the season for your boy Braden Taylor. Great question there, Sean Murphy. Appreciate that one as always. Ryan Miller has one in the chat for you here, Joe. Who is your best college pitcher in the 2022 class? I'm going Hunter Barco.
Interesting. So there's 2 ways of going about this. I would actually, so if we're going with the best college pitcher, the best pitcher in college, I think I would go Parker Messick. I think if there was a guy that I wanted to win me a ball game, I might go Parker Messick. The best pro prospect.
Right, because there's a difference.
There is a difference. Man, there's just the best pro prospect in this class. I think I would go Blade Tidwell. I know he's hurt, but it's an easy 97, 98 with a really good breaking ball. So Blade Tidwell would probably be my best bet for the most upside, I guess, for a college pitcher.
What is it about Messick? Because a lot of people know this, but many people might not. We talk about there is a significant difference between, you just said it, who do I want to win me one college game?
Yeah.
Which pitcher do I want to win me one college game? And that guy is Parker Messick for you. But when you word the question differently and you ask, who is the best college pitcher that will become the best pro? It's a different question entirely. And I don't know that everyone always understands or recognizes that difference or can actually pinpoint what it is that makes that difference. So what is it about Parker Messick that takes him from the number 1 guy that you would have on the bump to win a game in the College World Series to a guy that is not going to be that good or you don't feel is the best guy in the pros? What is it for him specifically?
Well, what makes him so good right now is he's extremely deceptive. It's a really good changeup. The fastball doesn't even need to eat all that much, even though it gets up into the low 90s. He's got a good breaking ball. But when you're talking about a pro prospect, you're talking about projection, right? And this is nothing against Parker Messick if he sees this. Parker Messick, I mean, he's 6 foot, 230 pounds. He doesn't have a super projectable body. It's not a body that you expect to add more velo. It's a body that you kind of have to watch as he gets into pro ball. And that's nothing against him. And he's very capable of keeping that body athletic and limber and staying a starting pitcher. But when you have as many moving pieces on the mound with an unorthodox delivery and you've got the body that Parker Messick has, there's a lot of where do we go from here with Parker Messick. So while he might be, I don't know if you guys remember this, but if you remember Jason White, he was a quarterback for Oklahoma in like 2002, and he won the Heisman Trophy. And Oklahoma, I think, won the national championship.
That's the year they beat Florida State, right?
Yeah. They might have beat Washington. I think they actually beat Washington State that year. But anyways, Heisman Trophy winner. They won the national championship. How's this guy not a first-round pick? Well, he wasn't even drafted. And the reason was he just didn't have the pro projection, the pro tools. He didn't have the arm strength. He didn't have the size, right? So, and that's kind of what you're talking about with Parker Messick. You just kind of wonder what it all looks like at 26 years old. Where with Blade Tidwell, he's 6'4", 205 pounds. He's already throwing 97. It suggests that he could throw more. He can really spin it. You kind of think, okay, well, maybe there's more in the tank. So that's the one differentiator.
Yeah, and I think if you look at Florida State, right, agree or disagree, Joe, Parker Messick, in terms of their future as a pro pitcher, on the current Florida State Seminoles roster, Parker Messick is fourth.
He's the fourth best.
He's the fourth best pro prospect
he's the fifth.
He's the fifth. So we're talking Carson Montgomery. We're talking Jackson Bowmeister. We're talking Bryce Hubbard. And then
Ross Dunn.
You're talking Ross Dunn.
I think every single one of the players that you just listed could end up going in the top 35 to 40 picks of their draft. Whereas I think Messick probably best fits in somewhere towards the end of the second round.
It's interesting how that, that happens, how you can,
he's the best. Isn't that wild? He's the best. If there was a guy that I could take to win a ball game in the entire country, it would be Parker Messick. And in terms of pro prospects, he might be the fifth best prospect on that team.
On his own team.
Yeah.
Like it's bizarre. It really is. But he's a Bulldog. And like you said, win one game.
Exactly.
And Florida State would take that, having never won the national championship. So great question, Ryan Miller. Here's a good one. We're going to go back to Gamers 2.0, a little team specific. Joe, is there a college pitcher you could see going top 15, perhaps to a team like the New York Mets? Kumar Rocker.
So this is totally a question that I can't answer. It's absolutely something that it's just, what's their flavor? I think Conor Prielipp could absolutely go here. Blade Tidwell absolutely could go here. I mean, go down the list, right? Gabriel Hughes could go here. Adam Mazer could go here. I don't think Adam Mazer really fits the type of profile that the Mets have generally targeted in the past, but
that's early for him, right? I mean, we've got him on the rise a bit, but
on the rise, but they've generally not gone for the smaller framed pitchers. Just in general, the Mets haven't. So I don't know if he necessarily fits what they're looking for, but yeah, I mean, take your pick. I do think the Mets want to target pitching in this draft, and I'm not sure there's a whole lot of it that, like, obviously staring you in the face makes sense.
Yeah,
I do think they'll take one. I'll say that. I do think the Mets will end up with a pitcher.
You think their first round pick is a pitcher?
I think they're going to go with a high school pitcher in the first round. But if there was one team that I would have circled as a potential college pitcher landing destination, the Mets have to be it.
So if we're going that route and we're going high school pitcher, because if it's going to be a pitcher, I would agree. I don't think it's going to be a college pitcher, especially one that's coming off injury. I just think that after what happened with Kumar Rocker, I don't know that the Mets are going to want to even risk something to do with an injury and not having the guy, something coming back with physicals or whatever it might be. The injury ends up being worse than it was originally reported, or recovery time is longer than they thought, or whatever. Could you see a guy like, what about high school pitcher?
What about Conor Prielipp? Because Prielipp is going to be, if he's 100% in June, suddenly you're talking about a college pitcher. I mean, he is a college pitcher. He just hasn't pitched like at all in college. But if he's 100% throwing bullpens and he's, touching 98 with a diabolical slider, he makes a lot of sense for the Mets.
So do you
again, we don't personally have him as a first round guy right now. That all can change,
right?
Because he hasn't thrown.
So do you lean Conor Prielipp here, or what about like a Brandon Barrera from high school ranks, or Jackson Ferris?
Brandon Barrera is our second top pitcher right now, but I don't really think he's a Mets prototype. Again, he's smaller, athletic, kind of comes for that Marcus Stroman type of build, but they don't draft that. So Jackson Ferris makes a ton of sense. Yeah, he's a much bigger 6'4", 6'5", 200 pounds lefty. I could see Jackson Ferris going to the Mets for sure.
All right, well, there it is. Hopefully the Mets get this one right. I know if you are a Mets fan, and there are a lot of them out there, the nightmare of what happened last year with Kumar Rocker, they are going to get the additional draft pick. So you could make an argument that it's going to end up working out for the Mets because they do get that extra pick. So, I mean, if they're able to hit on both of those picks, I think they have 10 and 11.
They have 9 and 11, I think.
9 and 11. Okay. So, if they're able to hit on both of those picks, then it kind of makes the Rocker thing a wash. And it's almost like there was no real downside. There was nothing, no harm.
Just the PR.
Yeah. Just the publicity and the fact that maybe they lost a year of development, or a year or two where that guy's going to take longer to get to the pro level, especially if they look at a Jackson Ferris at the high school ranks.
Yeah.
All right. So appreciate the questions as always. If there's no other questions out there, we're going to go ahead and get out of here, guys. Again, be sure to check out the Prospects Live top 400 list, prospectslive.com. You can get all the latest news on the top 400 draft prospects. As always, we will be here next Monday, 9 p.m. Eastern time for week 6. I believe it'll be now, Joe. Week 6.
Week 6, yeah.
We'll have week 6 analysis and reaction from the college baseball ranks. And so for my co-host, Joe Doyle, I am Chris Dunn. We will see you next Monday at 9 p.m. Take care, everybody. Have a good night.